Hey, welcome to another episode of the You Got the Wrong Dude podcast. This episode is all about the upcoming series Andor, which premieres later this month on Disney+. I'll be talking about my concerns, my hopes, and just more in depth because I've seen, Rogue One, of course, numerous times in that. And it's interesting because, Andor is a great character. Very strong presence in Rogue One. But I talk about, another character who I think should have got their own series. And actually a few characters, really. But we'll get more into that. So I'd love to hear from you. If you're listening on anchor.fm, you can leave a voice message. Otherwise, I have clips on YouTube. And of course, this podcast is available on Spotify. So, any comments, anything, hit me up on social media. It's at Ron Jammin. Facebook at RonJammin22. But let's get right into it. So from what I've read, this series takes place 5 years before the events of Rogue One. And they're going to have 2 seasons. Which to me, it's like, well, if you're covering, 5 years roughly of material, 2 seasons, I wonder if they're just going to kind of spread out the timeline of the episodes, like a direct lead into Rogue One, or are we just going to kind of leave off at a certain point for another series? But if you haven't seen Rogue One, just that movie, even if you've seen all the other Star Wars, with Rogue One, not only do we know the characters' fates, I won't say whether they make it through or not, but watching that movie, I was like, I figured if anyone would get their own series, it would be Orson Krennic, Director Krennic. Just because his rise to power would seem more interesting, at least to me. And it's nothing against Cassian Andor, because he's a great character. And when you do watch Rogue One, everyone shines in that film. It's brilliant. To me, it's a masterpiece. But with Cassian, my big problem, you could say, is that we already know his story. And again, I don't want to spoil Rogue One, but we get to know him right when we're introduced to him, what he does to, I don't know if that person was a friend, an ally, but right away we're like, and this isn't a spoiler, but he said, everything I did for the rebellion. And of course you can go back and explore that, but he said he's been in this fight since he was 6 years old, and it's like, okay. But what I'm saying is there isn't a lot of mystery. If they didn't reveal anything about his character in Rogue One, then I could understand a series. But in this one, it's kind of like with the Kenobi series. You put the title Kenobi, but it's not just about him. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot going on. And that being a limited series also, because Andor takes place, 5 years before Rogue One with 2 seasons. But it's like, when you start branching off and you have all these different storylines, it's like, well, what is the series about? Maybe if Cassian Andor was featured in it, but it's not his name on it. But, because it looks like it's very politically driven. It's about the formation of the rebellion. And it could be really interesting. But me, I just slap a different title on it. And then we're like, oh, Andor's in this. That's great. But yeah, Director Krennic having his own series, his rise to power, would be interesting. Because his dealings with Vader and even the Emperor. Because in Rogue One, it sounds like he hadn't met the Emperor. Because he said to Vader, you'll tell him, you'll tell the Emperor. And it's like, so he probably didn't have any dealings directly with Palpatine. But still, everything, maybe he will get a series. Because if Andor takes place 5 years before the events of Rogue One, you have 2 seasons. 2 seasons is either going to cover 5 years, or it's going to be, just 2 years, and then you have Krennic, his story. But it's just with Andor, with his character, I don't have any questions. There was nothing in the trailer. It didn't have one of those moments where you're like, like Darth Vader in Rogue One. Because when we saw more and more trailers for that, I was like, that space battle actually looks really good. And the ground assault as well, and the aerial battle. You see more shots like that, and you're just drawn in. The trailer for this didn't really have anything like that. And even the first clip, to me, was really boring. But if you're fresh to this character, then I'm sure you enjoyed the trailer. It was great. I'm hoping this is great. It could be really, really interesting. But I just need something to pull me into it. Like at the end of a trailer when they have that moment, you're like, no way. Now, it was great to see Saw Gerrera. He was in Rogue One for a little bit. But that movie, again, just works so well because every character has a purpose in the movie. They add to the story. You're not just like visiting a character where it's like, we don't have room for this. We need to move on, cut this character out. And it is interesting because I'm sure during the series we're going to see how he gets his injuries. Because if you've seen Rogue One, you know that he was in very different condition. And I'm hoping we see K2SO. Because that character worked because it wasn't annoying at all. It added humor. Rogue One, it's a very sad, very dark story, but beautifully done. And they sprinkled in just the right amount of humor. And it's not just about how much humor, but also where you place it. Because in The Last Jedi, just some spots it didn't work. Because it's fine, you have humor, because that's like universal with these movies. But Rogue One, it pulls you in, and you get all these different emotions, but it's so well paced in that. But I'm hoping to see those characters return. Now, while I said the trailer didn't have any moment or moments that really pulled me in, one of those like, no way, this is going to happen? Or wait, how is that character back? Or something like that. I wonder if they'll have something like a Baby Yoda for the Mandalorian. Because the Mandalorian, that's already a great character. And then the Baby Yoda thing, that just blew up on the internet. So if that series, if Andor has something like that, just something that keep us like captivated, intrigued. But it may not need it. And 3-episode premiere on September 21st. And I'm curious the running time of the episodes, because I believe the first season is 12 episodes, and giving us 3 right away. The 3 is interesting. You figure they'd go with like 2 episodes. But I'm not complaining. But I'm curious if they're going to be like, kind of all over the place like Mandalorian and Boba Fett, where it's like, this could be 40 minutes, it could be, 59 minutes, whatever. And I'm wondering if we'll get any scenes with Galen Erso. Because we know that, here I'm going to kind of spoil something, but in Rogue One, that's when Cassian Andor is made aware of the planet-killing weapon known as the Death Star. So they have to be careful. He doesn't know anything about it during this series throughout. He's not told about it. He doesn't see it or anything. No whispers. But it would be great to see Galen Erso. And we don't have to dive into like any backstory. We just see him. And, because of the tragedy that happened with his wife. And then not seeing Jin again for however so many years. Because I watched Rogue One, and when they quote unquote rescue Jin and they're interrogating her, Andor says, "When's the last time you were in contact with your father?" Because that's not saying he doesn't know Galen. maybe he's met him, had a conversation with him. In whatever context would fit, of course, with the rebellion and the Empire, but he's infiltrating the Imperial forces, the army in that, so it's very possible he could come across him. I think that'd be interesting. And also Darth Vader, Palpatine, even Director Krennic. Are we going to see them in any cameos? That would be really cool. And I don't see them... I don't know, because it could be we see the formation of the rebellion, and then we cut to like the rise of the Empire. Just because throughout that time they're continuing to build and grow stronger in that. So maybe they'll have like, here's the rebellion, and then we cut to scenes with Palpatine and Vader, Krennic, something like that. Oh, I love the cinematography in the trailer, and even in that first clip. It just brought you right back to Star Wars, to Rogue One, kind of like Solo, that kind of gritty look. And no shaky cam, at least in the trailer, in the first clip. Because for me, it didn't ruin Kenobi, but it definitely, made those scenes unwatchable, unrepeatable rather. Because it just didn't add anything. Like when you want to add weight to a shot, you hear like a loud boom. Like Jurassic Park, you're not dealing with shaky cam. You want to add weight to it. Shaky, it just makes it feel so light because the camera's just, going all over the place, and you're like, this just doesn't add anything to it. And back to characters who I think should have their own series. Qui-Gon and Darth Maul. I mean, arguably two of the highlights, maybe the only highlights from the Star Wars prequel trilogy. The two standouts in that. It's like, what about series for them? And I'm sure those are in the works, and I know there's always issues over the years with rights and licensing and such. That I totally understand, but, with Andor, it's like, well, there's just no mystery about the character. And I don't want to take anything away from it. Like, Diego Luna is fantastic. I love the character in Rogue One. But it's one of those you pick out and you're like, huh. Because it's like, he's a great character. But we kind of got to know him in that movie. Whereas Qui-Gon, Darth Maul, I mean, those we know very, very little of. If you haven't read the, the books in that. But let me know what you think. What characters would you like to see have a series? What you thought of like The Mandalorian, Book of Boba Fett, Kenobi. And if you're looking forward to Andor. And the Death Star. Are we going to see the creation, the idea of it? Like the very beginning, like how do they keep it a secret? Because we know from Rogue One that Cassian finds out at the beginning of the movie about it. So obviously it won't be him witnessing it. It won't be him finding out about it. But are we going to see it? Because I just wonder with this series if it's going to be like, kind of side by side, parallel stories about the creation of the rebellion and then the rise of the Empire. Because it could just be like kind of a cameo. Maybe at the end of the series we see the beginnings of the Death Star. And could be interesting, could add something to it, I think. Because, 5 years before Rogue One, but who knows how long it took to build that thing. Now, despite what I said, about this series in general, like no mystery, nothing really drew me in. Like you like the character, but at the same time it's like, what else is there really to dive into? I did read a quote saying it'll change the way we look at Rogue One. But even that, I'm like, I don't know, because of what he did in the beginning of Rogue One to his friend or his ally, whoever that person was, I'm wondering if that's what they're getting at. Like maybe they forgot that scene. It's like, yeah, he's done terrible things, for the rebellion. But there could be another big revelation. There's something I'm missing, not thinking of. And not even necessarily like a twist in the series, but just something when you're like, oh my gosh. But I'm really hoping I'm wrong in regards to that stuff. Like there's something I'm like, oh my gosh. Because yeah, it's going to be interesting because he infiltrates the Empire, but maybe he gets kind of lured in and he's like, Because, they're like, oh, we're going to change the universe. The Empire wants to save people and all that. And even though he said he's been in this fight since he was 6 years old in Rogue One, that doesn't mean he was just fighting for the rebellion. Because obviously that didn't come along until later in his life. So maybe he did horrible things for the Empire as well. And maybe has like a Finn moment. Where you kind of wake up in your stormtrooper outfit. And you're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But because now I'm thinking, like in the Solo movie. With Emilia Clarke's character. I remember that worked because we learned she'd done a lot of terrible things without them even like flashing back or anything. No montage. Just all the stuff that she had done. So I wonder if it's on that kind of level because that worked and that changed the way I looked at that character. And in the series, we'll probably see what he's talking about when he said he's done terrible things in that. But yeah, that worked for me in Solo. Because we learned she had to survive and, she did what she had to do. And another idea on the same level with Galen Erso. I don't know, this isn't like something necessary per se. It's just an idea that I have, but because it'd be different kind of cameo. It'd be like a character you're happy to see again, but at the same time, it's not like, oh, we're just throwing this in to get ratings. But maybe something with Jyn Erso, like she helps out unknowingly, or obviously her and Cassian wouldn't meet at all during this series. But she has her like side mission, and she's not recruited yet. And again, this is 5 years before Rogue One. But she's on some assignment or something, some job. And ends up like helping the rebellion in some way. Unknowingly. Like not attached at all. I'm talking like a single episode. And maybe just a cameo. And they're like, who finished that job? Who completed it? But at the same time, I mean, it's all about like continuity in that too, because they didn't really become interested in her until Rogue One, when it was leaked about the Death Star, and her father, his dealings with that, his role. But that was just one idea I had, one random thing. I thought it'd be nice, and yeah, I don't want to spoil anything about Rogue One, but just the way that movie ends, you're kind of like, yeah, I don't want to spoil anything. But it's a great film. Make sure and watch it. But the nice thing is you don't need to watch it before going into Andor, the series. That you can go into fresh. And that may be a better way to experience it. Kind of like when people talk about what order to watch all the Star Wars movies in. And if you're fresh to them, you're brand new, it's just a great experience. Well, that is going to do it for this episode. I appreciate you tuning in, and I'd love to hear from you. If you're listening on anchor.fm, you can leave a voice message. The podcast full episodes are available on Spotify and anchor.fm, as well as video clips on Spotify and YouTube. So be sure to check those out. And shout out to canva.com. That's what I use to create the artwork, all the thumbnails and such. And if you'd like to sponsor an episode, hit me up on social media at ronjammin and ronjammin22 on Facebook. And check out my music albums and singles in digital stores under ronjammin22. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this series. But if it's like delayed, I really wouldn't mind. I wouldn't be bothered. But I'm hoping it's great because the action in the trailer looks good. But I picture a lot of dialogue, a lot of conversations, and you just hope it's not boring. And hopefully there's, a big reveal, a big mystery, something revealed, but I'm sure we'll see Andor do a lot of terrible things, because his character, you're playing both sides, But, yeah, so 3 episodes, September 21st on Disney+, and I'll be back to review those. And I look forward to hearing from you. So I will see you next time. And thanks again for listening.